Welcome to the Heidi Show podcast, where you'll hear compelling stories of female leaders, innovators, and creatives. Today, my guest is Octavia Gilmore, and her story is amazing. This girl so impressed me. In fact, how we met was I went to this marketing one-day conference here in Atlanta. I just did it because I'm a voiceover talent and I do a lot of commercials. And so I just kind of wanted to get a feel for what are some of the problems and challenges that marketing people are experiencing these days. So that way I could kind of see my role as a voiceover talent. Anyways, Octavia was sitting at my table and I started asking her more about herself. And this girl is amazing. So she founded Creative Juice, which is an award-winning creative agency. She started it, get this, at the age of 23. She got out of SCAD and immediately opened up her own agency. That was in 2013. And not only that, okay, obviously she's female, she's minority, and she's millennial. Yeah. Can you imagine how many challenges she encountered along the way? So Creative Juice, it creates branding, marketing, and web design services to help businesses grow. And some of the companies that she's worked with have been LG, Equifax, Cox, Home Depot, Habitat for Humanity, and Georgia Tech, just to name a few. So we're going to talk to her in just a little bit about, what she experienced in childhood growing up that gave her that confidence and that bravery just to open up her own agency at such a young age. And she's just thriving now. But I wanted to share a little bit, listening back to her podcast episode, it just made me realize that there's a couple things that it made me realize. One is that creating a business, running a small business, that comes with a lot of challenges, right? But then there's also some really good things that come along with it. And lately, for our studio, for our voiceover studio, so my husband and I own Atlanta Voiceover Studio, and we started that almost 3 years ago. There have been some really tough situations, and it has been really hard. And so some days it's very easy to just focus on those problems because that's all you receive and you're getting. But there's a lot of good things that come from it. So I wanted to share with you personally some of our specific challenges that we've faced along the way, but also some really great things that come along with it. And I hope that this inspires you, whether you are a small business owner, to write down your challenges, write down your problems. I don't ever want to deny that that's going on and that there are hard days, but also to think about some of the benefits that are coming from it. So one of the big things that happened to us this year is we ended up having to pay $20,000 in taxes. And it's because of the studio, because we have been saving all the money that the studio has been bringing in because we need to move to a new space. The space that we're in is just too small. And so we need a lot of money to be able to move into a new space. We want to build out a studio and just requires a lot of money. So we've been putting that aside. Well, because of that, it looks like we made a lot more. And and we don't have as much to write off as far as with Atlanta Voiceover Studio. So that really kind of dinged us, even though we, have things set up with Mike Stout Productions and Heidi Productions with our own voiceover careers. Yeah, that was not fun. Then the other thing is no paycheck. So we took a paycheck for a few months over last summer, and it wasn't much, but that is all of the money that we have gotten from the studio. And I think a lot of people see what we're doing and they think, oh, that's really nice that you are diversifying your income. And we're like, no, we're not actually. In fact, we have, put our own money in to get this started, obviously. And it's just funny because we were doing our taxes and we're like, wow, the instructors that have come through here have made way more money from the studio than we have, which is fine. But there are some days where when we're working a ton of hours, it's just like, oh man, you really got to pull something from inside you to keep going sometimes because you're like, this feels really discouraging, disheartening. Not that the money is part of it, but if you're putting that much time and effort and you just want it to be worth it, I guess. So That's part of it. And hopefully we will take a paycheck eventually, just as more of a to compensate for our time, you know. Won't be much though, I'm sure. The other thing is sacrificing our own career. Because we're in a voiceover studio that does a lot of training and gives back to students, there are a lot of students that come to us and ask us for advice. We always say, just email us, but the responses to those emails sometimes take a lot of time. During the day, we are the engineers right now, and so there are times where I'm in the middle of a session with somebody else and my agent is texting me and I can't respond because I'm here with another another talent that's on a Source Connect session or whatever. And so sometimes that's really tough because we feel like at times we sacrifice our own careers to help other people. Um, yeah, so that's just a challenge that we have to work through. All the hours, uh, it doesn't ever stop, and people need something all the time. And if there's any problem, guess what? We're the ones that need to solve it. Ultimately, we are responsible for any failure or for any success that comes through the studio. And that just is a 24/7 burden and responsibility. So that's tough. Yeah, those are a few things that we've had challenges through. We also had challenges working together as a married couple, but we've really worked through a lot of that. But all that to say, on some of the hardest days, here are some things that we need to think about that have come from this studio. One of the things is there is no greater resilience training. If you have either had a small business for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're just starting a small business or you're considering that, think about that. That is such a gift because for a while I would get so anxious over certain things. And somebody asked me recently, are you still dealing with some anxiety? And I said, no, actually. And I think that it's because it's just continued to build resilience in me. And I'm like, yeah, that is a big problem. But you know what? We've faced other big problems. We'll figure out a solution. We will get through this. And we may have to apologize along the way. We may make some big mistakes, but we'll get through this and we'll figure it out. The other thing is there's always new things to learn. Constantly. It never ever stops. And that's not only good for our mind, but it's good for just our soul. And then it makes us more valuable as a worker. Even if this totally falls through, I feel like if I were to ever go back into corporate America, that I would be able to add so much more value than I did before because of all the things that I've learned. And then the last thing is we have the opportunity through this studio to give to others. And there is such a blessing in being able to see someone grow and learn new things and have those aha moments. That is worth more than a paycheck. And so we are so grateful that we get to witness that and that we get to be a part of that and that we get to help other people. And I just need to remember that. It's just there are some days when you've worked, 16 hours and you haven't gotten enough sleep. And, it just feels like I can't give any more to other people. So, yeah, so that's where we're at. And I just wanted to leave with a quote by Maya Angelou that really impacted me. She said on a podcast with Oprah, if you get, give. If you learn, teach. And I thought that's something that I need to remember every single day as a small business owner. Okay, enough from me. Let's now hear from Octavia Gilmore. Okay, Octavia. So let's talk about your childhood. You grew up in New Jersey, and I want to know, was there something in your childhood that contributed to this like bravery that you had leaving SCAD and deciding I'm going to just open up my own agency?
Sure, great question. So I grew up in New Jersey, I was raised by a single mom. She worked really hard to take care of my younger brother and I. And that kind of hard work was just instilled in me at a very young age. I was always the person working like two jobs. So I had like a job at Toys R Us when that still existed.
Oh, fun.
In high school, and then I also worked another job at like a science center. And yeah, I've just always been fairly hardworking, very independent. I bought my first car when I was 17. I saved up like $2,500. So
Wow.
yeah, and then also my family, they're all artists. I'm the only one that decided to kind of pursue art as a career. But they are like super talented, whether it's painting, sculpting. Back in the day, they had a T-shirt line that they used to sell for towards the church. So
Yeah.
like a religious T-shirt line that was really really cool, where they took their own like illustrations and printed them on T-shirts. So they don't have that anymore, unfortunately. But that kind of also showed me a little bit about like entrepreneurship and kind of starting something from nothing and taking your own ideas and creating something that people like. So I would say those two things definitely contributed to me transitioning into wanting to own my own agency. I went to a school in New Jersey, which was actually the number one school for like academics in the state of New Jersey. And I didn't necessarily have any formal art training, but my uncle introduced me to graphic design around the age of 14, like giving me Photoshop, and I kind of just fell in love with it. So I decided to kind of turn my passion into profit and pursue that as a career, and then eventually open my own agency.
Wow. So you went to school in New Jersey and then you came down to SCAD afterwards. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, great. So beginning out of school, though,
Mm-hmm.
you're young, you're female, and you're African American.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what kind of hurdles did all of that create? I mean, did you have a hard time for people taking you seriously?
Yes. So when I was around a junior in college, I started freelancing while I was in school just to try to get as much experience as I could. So when I graduated, I kind of had like more experience than people my age because I just try to do anything and everything to get experience. So after I graduated, I took a full-time role at a startup company, and it was cool, but it just wasn't for me. But I still continued to freelance on the side. And I actually told the CEO of that company, like, hey, this is cool, but one day I want to open my own agency. And he actually said, as long as you get your work done here, I don't care what you do. So I would get my work done at work, right? Most CEOs don't say that. And then I would go and like meet clients for lunch. So luckily for me, by the time I decided to launch my agency, I had some clients, but then these were all like small businesses. If you look at my client list now, I have a lot of like large corporations. So I think the biggest hurdle for me is just number one, when I'm pitching like these large clients, I'm asking them for, anywhere between $25 and like $50,000, right? And they're looking at me like, who's this girl? Like, why should we
Right.
trust you? So that's like the first thing I had to kind of really just sell them on like the value that I bring, and really just my hard work and how I am like no other person in my opinion can outwork me when it comes to like just running my agency and making sure that we uphold the standard. But then also just looking at other agencies, primarily like in the Southeast, all of them or most of them are owned by white males. So I always tell people this story. I went to like an agency meetup last year, and there were 30 people in the room, and I was the only minority and the only female. And this was a meetup for agency owners. So everyone was a white male. So it's like when I'm pitching these clients, I'm going up against white males, and also I'm pitching typically white males. So I think now there has been like a little bit of a shift where people value diversity and like the perspective that my agency brings to the table. So they're kind of like looking for the underdog. They basically say like, hey, we're looking at all these other agencies. They all look the same. Creative just kind of stands out because you guys are different. And even if they don't decide to move forward with us, at least we're able to kind of get our foot in the door because they saw that we were a little bit different, and they wanted to see what we could bring to the table that maybe the next agency couldn't. So
Yeah.
it's been a journey.
Right.
I've gotten, to the point where as an entrepreneur, you have to kind of master sales at the end of the day. And I used to hate sales, hate networking, but I just do it so much now. There's not a room that I can go into where someone hasn't at least heard of Creative Juice or heard of me, which is pretty cool. And I'm pretty proud of what I was able to accomplish without any like business partners, any funding. I pretty much built Creative Juice from the ground up. Started out working at home on my couch with my laptop, and now we have like a full blown office and I have a team. So it's definitely been a journey. I've learned a lot, but I will say sometimes it is still a struggle, when
Sure.
you think about like the Good Old Boys Network and me just trying to like break into that. But again, I think people are starting to really value having something different
Right.
and that different perspective. Just being a millennial, we bring, the fresh ideas to the table. Not saying other agencies can't, but
You have a
people come
different
to us.
perspective,
Yes.
like you said.
Yeah. And they say, like, we want to look cool. And they know if they see something online, we know what it is because
Right.
we're millennials, right? So, or we maybe have invented it or something of that sort. So,
Yeah. So what about leading others though? Was there any challenge of being a younger woman?
Sure.
Was there any challenge in trying to get people on board and then having them respect you or leading them? Was there anything like that or?
Yes, definitely. So I would say that's still something I'm trying to master. Luckily for me, I attend a lot of events and conferences and programs and classes with other business owners, and they all say like the hardest part is the people, right? But I think for me, the biggest challenge has been managing people my age, right? So like we have a lot in common. We're kind of cool, buddy, but at the end of the day, I still sign your paycheck. So there has to be a certain level of not only like respect, but also trust there. And it's something that I'm working at every day. I definitely take the time and invest in myself to get resources so that I can always be the best leader. I think that I was already a pretty like detail oriented person. I'm also a Virgo. I don't know if anyone believes in that stuff, but we're usually very self-critical. So I always want to be like the best leader, and it's very stressful because you just always want to make the best decision.
Sure.
And at some point, I think around when I was like 27, I had to tell myself, girl, you are 27. You're not going to know what you're doing
Right.
every time. Like, cut yourself some slack and give yourself some grace. You're going to make mistakes. Just continue to learn and fail forward. And obviously not make the same mistakes again. But I think once I had that conversation with myself to say, you can't always know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You've never done this before. And then there are people like twice your age who make mistakes, right? There are large corporations who make mistakes. So once I kind of got through that, I kind of just was like, okay, as long as I'm being the best me that I can be at every time, then that's all I can do at the end of the day.
Right, sure. You mentioned resources. Has there been any books or anything that you've read that you're like, oh, this has really helped me and impacted me as a leader?
Sure. There is a book called H3 Leadership. It actually combines like religion or faith rather with business, which is pretty cool. And that was a really, really good book that I read. I also read a book called Successful Women Think Differently. And it just covered like all aspects of being a successful woman, whether it's having a mentor, investing in your growth, right? Investing in yourself financially, stuff like that. It was like a holistic approach to being a successful woman. And that was a pretty good book that I read over and over again.
Yeah, that's really great. One of the things that, talking about just leading others, that I found is tough is because you have a brand of Creative Juice that you are totally loyal to. Like that,
Right.
ultimately, at the end of the day, if that's not successful, no one else will be.
Right.
But also, other people that are on your team don't always see it as that way.
Right.
They are very much like, look, this is what I need, or this is what I can contribute, or, and I've found that it's been really tough to, okay, how do I constantly think about everybody else's needs, the brand as a whole, the employees or team members, and then also clients or students that come through our studio.
Right.
Have you found any gleam of wisdom or keys to the kingdom with that?
Right. I actually read something yesterday. It said that the more power you have, the less empathy you have, which was
Mm.
interesting, which is why most people say that their managers are like mean.
Yeah.
But I think I have very candid conversations with my employees. And while I always want to understand their perspective, I also give them my perspective and I just break it down in a way that they can understand that I'm not trying to be mean or harsh. But at the end of the day, I have a business to run and I'm in business to make money. And then I have to, continue to keep money and clients coming in so I can pay your salary. So I think that me just being very transparent with my team has helped me a lot. And then also, I tell my team this, but I also tell myself this. If I make a mistake as a leader, it doesn't mean that I am a bad person, right?
Mhm.
Separating Octavia as a leader and Octavia as a person are two different things.
Hmm.
So I try to keep that in mind because oftentimes you can like feel like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person, right? If you make a mistake as a leader or you hurt someone's feelings or just whatever. So I try to just separate those two. Like Octavia, the leader, is different than Octavia, the person.
Yeah, that is really good. Okay, I'm glad that I asked you. Was there ever a point along the way that you just felt like, I give up? It's just too hard. I can't do this. Why don't I just go somewhere else where I don't have to think about all these different things?
That happens often.
You're like, this morning.
Right. But I have a bunch of mentors. I have a really strong support system. I have a bunch of friends who are always constantly talking me off the ledge, right? We just celebrated 6 years in business and like honestly it kind of just crept up on me. I woke up one day and I'm like, oh wow, it's been 6 years already. So like look at what I've been through. And then going back to that point of not always being in a room where someone knows who I am, I meet a lot of other millennials, millennial women, minority millennials who are like, "Yeah, I've heard of Creative Juice. I've been following you guys for years. I want to do what you're doing, right?"
Wow.
So it's like I need to keep helping like blaze that trail for the next generation of
Mm.
entrepreneurs. And I have to realize, or I have realized, that this is bigger than just me and that I have a bigger purpose, right? Which is to continue to encourage diversity when it comes to small business and kind of even the playing field, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about how this is much bigger than me, that kind of gives me the motivation to keep going and not give up because people are watching me even when I don't realize it.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Um, what do you think that people have wrong about millennials? I mean, I think a lot of people know. I mean, it's not like as um, what's the word? A rare word to hear
Mhm.
these days now, but still, I think people get a wrong idea about millennials. What do you think
Right.
that is?
I think it's funny because so all these like business classes I join, I'm usually the youngest business owner in the room, and every time they talk about millennials, they just like turn to
Right.
me to get my perspective. But obviously the typical things people say is like, oh, they're entitled and whatever, right? Spoiled, and they just want their way. Some of that's true. I'm not gonna lie, but I think that millennials are all about challenging the status quo. Like, without millennials, we would not have Facebook and Lyft and Uber, right? Like, we're changing the world at the end of the day. So, while, we're not perfect, I think we do value hard work and we believe in working smarter, not harder, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of the other generations, they'll stay in a job for like 20, 30 years. We're always just trying to be better and think about the easiest or fastest way to do something to be more efficient with our time. So I think that, again, we're kind of revolutionizing just business in general with our ideas. And I think that's something that's very valuable. And I think even the generation after us, like, we grew up without, email and or whatever and Wi-Fi, and now like we had to learn all of that. Like the generation after us, they were born with, iPhones in their hands, right? So it's like just think about what they're going to actually accomplish when it
Hmm.
comes to changing the world. I think it's pretty like inspirational.
Yeah. You have something on your wall at work, and it says, every problem is an opportunity for a creative solution. So, what's been your most proudest, or I guess what's your proudest, that's incorrect grammar,
Mhm.
what's your proudest creative solution to a problem?
I would say so we work with a wide variety of different clients. I think my proudest project has probably this probably Home Depot. We I worked on them for like 2 years before I could get them as a client. So that was just a lot of like courting them and showing
Right.
the value. And then they actually were pretty open, even though they're a really large business. They said, we want some creative juice. Like, we are Home Depot, we have our standard, right? But like, how do we look a little bit more cool and hip? So I thought that was pretty cool that they entrusted in Creative Juice to develop materials for them. So we designed some like trade show graphics for them, and we presented to them a few different design directions. One a little bit more like Home Depot ish, but added a sprinkle of creative juice, and then the other option was just like all creative juice. But even to see that they were like open
Hmm.
to those ideas was pretty cool as a really big company. So I would say I'm most proud of that, again, especially because it took me 2 years to kind of land that
Right.
client.
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so not only do you run a great business, but you also are very committed to giving back. You partner with Atlanta Public Schools to give students a real life experience working in a creative business
Hmm.
environment, which is so awesome. You're on board of Next Generation Men and Women, a nonprofit that exposes students to career options and preparing them for college. Which I think is so important too for minorities to see
Hmm.
other leaders like that. They need to
Right.
see those examples. Um, so, what motivated you to be involved in this way?
Yes. So I think just growing up, at least from where I'm from, obviously there are not a lot of business owners that look like me, especially in the corporate space. So I kind of made it's just something I'm really passionate
Mm-hmm.
about, exposing students to just the different opportunities that they can have, and then helping open up their minds into them building generational wealth for their families. So, yes, I partner with everyone that I can, but my biggest partnerships are Atlanta Public Schools as well as Next Generation Men. They do like exposure trips where junior and senior high school students come, and I give them a tour of the office. I kind of tell them a little bit about myself, and then they're able to ask me any questions that they might have about whether it's business, entrepreneurship, or whatever. And one of the students said that she felt like if I could do it, she could do it, right? So that's kind of why I do what I do. Like, I want people to see themselves in me and know that there is nothing that can stand in their way when it comes to them like accomplishing their dreams. Like, so I think that that's really really important that they see someone who looks like them, and then also I can resonate with them because I've been in their shoes, right?
Mm.
So that's just really really important to me.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. I know, I mean, I have a different perspective, obviously, growing up as a white woman, but I mentor a little girl, and I think that helped open my eyes to little
Mhm.
things that I didn't know before,
Right,
just
yeah.
like going to the library and picking out books and wanting to pick out a book that had a girl that looked like her on the
Right.
cover,
Yeah.
and having a hard time doing that, and just it just kind of made me start to look more at the world around
Mhm.
me and go, "Oh my gosh, what
Yeah.
I want more for her." And so thank you so very much for doing that. And I just really appreciate it. Not that, yeah. So thank you so much. So today, right now, I know that you encounter all kinds of challenges being a
Mhm.
business owner. What's one of the biggest things that you're learning right now?
I am trying to figure out how to scale my business. So, we've been in business for 6 years. We're in a pretty good spot where at a certain price point of a client, I can close that fairly easy. So now it's just how do you get to the next level? And again, I think that goes back to working smarter, not harder. So looking at our internal processes, figuring out how we can be more efficient, how we can streamline some things, and then looking at the team and saying like what are the core people I need to kind of get to the next level. So I've been entertaining like bringing on a business development manager to help me with sales, or just trying to figure out how to switch my model so it's more retainer based. Right now everything we do is pretty much project based,
Okay.
so just trying to set ourselves up so we can have like that reoccurring revenue so we
Mm-hmm.
can get scale faster. But that's pretty much what I'm trying to figure out now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Octavia, thank you so very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it and sharing your wisdom and all that you've learned. And thank you for being such a great example to women, to young people, to minorities, to millennials, to you run the gamut of a lot of people that you are leading by example. So thank you so much, and I just wish you the world of success. And if you want to follow Octavia and Creative Juice, then you can find the links to them all below in the show notes. So thank you, Octavia.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Heidi Rue Show podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch the next one, and make sure you hit that bell. And if you'd like to listen via the podcast platforms, you can find those below. We would love to hear from you. Join in on the conversation on Instagram or Facebook. And I hope this episode encouraged you. Don't stop, get it, get it.